Okay, thanks for your patience as we troubleshooted a few technological issues. So thanks everybody for joining us this morning. We're excited to have the opportunity to present the end results of a many years project, a collaboration between the University of Idaho and the Nez Perce Tribe, titled Building Science Identity and Career Interest Through UAV and Remote Sensing Technology. It's funded by the National Science Foundation. And today we're going to talk about the sort of theoretical and philosophical framework for what we did. We're going to talk about some of the things that actually happened. We're going to talk about some student reflections, and a few of the graduate students who are part of the project are going to present some of their work. And then we'll have some time at the end for future directions and just kind of reflections on the context and what all of this means. So thanks everybody for joining us. I want to start by just acknowledging that this project has a lot of people who contributed in many significant ways. I want to acknowledge Kay, who is our main tribal partner, who actually was the originator of the idea for the project, in combination with Melinda Davis, had a vision for workforce development and use of interesting technology to prepare young people to be employed by the tribe in fisheries, forestry, and fire management. I want to thank our elders who are here today, and we'll have a chance to weigh in. I want to thank the University of Idaho co-PIs on this project. So Teresa Cohn, Jan Eitel, Lee Vierling. And then we had significant collaboration from the school district. Many teachers were involved. And the University of Idaho Upward Bound program, so Randy Bennett, Eric Gower, Kaylee Heater, and then our graduate students who came on to this kind of crazy project and just plugged in and figured out ways to be part of the mix. So it was incredibly just a community effort. And so thanks to everybody for all of the different roles that they played. So I'm Carla Idle. I'm going to be introducing myself and the project. We're going to then transition to Raymond Dixon, who's going to talk about a DACM process that helped us identify the skills and career abilities necessary for entry-level workforce that we're trying to build through the curriculum. We're going to come back to me to talk about a curriculum overview and some of the results. And that's going to be with help from Josiah Pinkham and our elders. And then Marcy Carter is going to do a presentation of her the plans for her doctoral work. We're going to show a video made by graduate student Christina Wu, and then we're going to ask Josiah Pinkham to help us understand the context of this project within the broader things going on currently. And Kay is going to take us home with conversations about what's next. So I'm going to just start with a quick introduction to me, who I am. So I'm Carla Idle. I'm the daughter of Brian Bradley and Judy Bradley. My dad was an Irish immigrant and a scientist. My mom was the daughter of Swedish immigrants and grew up on a farm in northern Minnesota on 600 acres, no running water or electricity. Being raised by the two of them shaped a lot of the way that I think about the world. And I have seen that play out in my role within this project. So I wanted to bring them into this and introduce myself by sharing that I came from them. They had different types of knowledge. My mom had very practical knowledge. My dad had a very, the quintessential scientist kind of knowledge. And I saw firsthand how different knowledges work in the world, and really appreciated the value of these different kinds of knowledge. And that shapes some of the way that I think about the world today. So I want to, just acknowledge them. I'm the wife of Jan Eitel and the mother of two rascals here, Noah and Svea. And within this project, my children have had the opportunity to learn from Nez Perce elders, to hear stories that have originated from the land that they live on now. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity that they have. And so I also just want to acknowledge that I'm grateful for the colleagues and collaborators that I have within the tribe, the Nez Perce tribe, and that we as a project have had the honor and privilege of educating on this landscape, and the opportunity to learn from elders and to hear stories and to learn from the land. And I see this work as a reflection of some of the gratitude we have for being welcomed as visitors here, and also the responsibility that we have. So again, thanks for all of that. And I want to talk just quickly about some of the general framing for a lot of the work that happens at the McCall Outdoor Science School, where some of this work took place. So three of the big things that we kind of organize learning around are these ideas of scientific literacy, sense of place, and community skills. So that means like thinking about how science is done, who does science, what's our connection to the land and to the to our more than human relatives, and how do we work effectively together? How do we communicate well? How do we work together when it comes to problem solving? And so that was fundamentally part of a lot of what we did in this project. We focused a little bit on this idea of science identity, thinking about how we think about how science is done and who does science. One of the aspects of that is this idea of recognition. And one of the pieces that we focused on in this project was broadening recognition of scientific knowledge, expanding definitions, so that Indigenous knowledge systems, looking at the relationship between Indigenous knowledge systems and the way that people talk about scientific knowledge, and pushing young people to explore the boundaries and the relationships there. And I think Josiah really summed this up nicely when he said, we really want young people to understand that the scientific method that they've been using, they've been observing and measuring the relationships between phenomena. Oops. For eons. And this is why I say that Indigenous populations are America's oldest and most sensitive scientists. So really building on that recognition of the science that has always been here on this land, and that has been the foundation, part of the foundation for a thriving existing community. So our project goals, we wanted to explore the use of UAVs within the cultural context of the tribe's fisheries and natural resources, prepare students for entry-level positions in fisheries, forestry, natural resources with the tribe. We wanted to conduct this work in the way that it integrates the broader community as partners, and that was through elders, through the workforce. We wanted to help students understand that their own cultural identity and the intersection that has with this idea of a science identity. And then finally, just providing this culturally responsive curriculum, which we also connected to a dual enrollment credit course for Environmental Science 101 and 102 through the University of Idaho. So the project had started with the DACOM process, which identified entry-level skills and dispositions necessary for forestry, fisheries, and fire management jobs within the tribe. We had a summer camp that ran for 3 summers, school year curriculum integrated into coursework at the school. And then finally, there was a research component. Overall, we served a number of students over the course of 3 years in the summer camp. And significantly, we had a mix of Native and non-Native students. So I think part of the program, and I hope Kay will talk about this a little bit, was the chance for non-Native students to also learn to understand the Indigenous science that comes from this land, alongside developing Native students' science identity. So I'm going to turn it over to Raymond to talk about the DACOM process. And I think I will advance your.
Thank you, Carla. Let me introduce myself. My name is Raymond Dixon, and I'm an associate professor and also chair of the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences at the University of Idaho. I was invited to participate in this project by Kay and Melinda. And one of the focus of my work, I do workforce development. And so I have expertise in identifying competencies that are important to be integrated in curriculums. And as you realize, as you just noticed from Carla's presentation, one of the objectives of this course, this project, was to prepare students for entry-level positions in natural resources among the tribe. And so one of my focus was to identify these entry-level competencies that students will need to have in order to be prepared for workforce requirements among the natural resources and natural resources. So we set out to identify the competencies for the fisheries and also competencies for forestry and fire management. Now, I use the DACOM process. This is a process that utilizes experts who are working in a job or occupational area, and we use them to identify the competencies that are required for that job area. Typically, we use about 6 to 12 experts. Research shows that whenever we use that number, you're pretty able to get a valid competency profile of what is required for those job areas. So for the fisheries, we had 6 experts from the Nez Perce fisheries and 9 experts from forestry and fire management. And the objectives were to identify the duties for those job areas, the tasks that are required for those job areas, and also the enabling knowledge, skills, and attitude and tools that students would need to perform those entry-level job proficiently. So over a course of 2 days, we were able to identify those competencies, and a competency profile chart was prepared and presented to the tribe. Next. These are just the cover page of those competency profile charts, and it pretty much captures the full range of competencies that are required for forestry and fire management technician position, and also the competency profile chart that is required for fisheries technician 1 among the Nez Perce tribe. Next chart, please. Now, one of the important findings of this process, typically the competency profile charts identify the professional and technical competencies that are required for a particular job. For the fisheries, 7 duties were identified and 65 tasks. Now, typically the tasks are the competencies that you normally integrate into the curriculum. And so from the task, you are able to determine the steps that are required to do a particular task, and you're able to write objectives and integrate those into the curriculum. For the forestry and fire management, we identified 12 duties and 78 tasks. Now, one of the things that came out in this process, which I'd never had that experience before, is that is when it is in relationship to cultural competencies. Now, in my experience doing competency profile, cultural competencies are usually identified as enabling attitudes that students would need in order to carry out a job function. Now, in my interaction with the experts, it was made clear to me that cultural competencies should be a priority. It should be critical. And so cultural competencies were identified as a duty in these competency profiles. For example, for the fisheries competency profile, one of the duties that was identified, and this was the number one duty, is that students should have knowledge of Nez Perce culture. And one of the tasks that is associated with it is that they should appreciate Nez Perce knowledge, or language rather. And for forestry and fire management, the first duty that was identified is that students should appreciate Ninipu's culture and values. And one of the tasks that was identified was they should share Nez Perce vision. So these were some of the exciting things that came out of these competency profile that was developed for fisheries and forestry and fire management. The experts also identified the tasks that they think can be integrated in the high school curriculum. So from off the bat, students who are in high school at the junior, higher secondary level, they can start learning these competencies that will prepare them for entry-level positions in fisheries and also in forestry and fire management. And hopefully later on, these competencies can be used as a basis for developing badges and micro-credentials that students can acquire from there in high school so that they can enter the workforce, knowing that they have competencies that will help them to be successful in their jobs. Thank you.
Here we go, take two. So thanks, Raymond. And I guess I wanted to point out one of the competencies that I appreciated, that I also experienced, I think is necessary. And I'm working on developing my competency in this area, is to understand Nez Perce humor. And I really appreciated that was identified as a Leroy, Seth, and Cy Whitman and Josiah have all, they've been schooling me as best they can on that. So I'm going to talk about just the curriculum and then share some results. And I'm going to invite Josiah Pinkham, Cy Whitman, Leroy Seth, and Lee Bourgeau to comment on any part of this. They can jump in at any time. We can figure out how to do that if you just want to wave your hands to me. Just Josiah is getting some feedback in cultural resources, and was one of the collaborators and one of the co-instructors for this course. Cy Whitman, Leroy Seth, and Lee Bourgeau were our elder consultants and participated in camp, and also really helped to shape and guide the curriculum, along with a number of staff professionals from forestry, fisheries, and fire management. So some of the just elements that I do want to talk about just generally, within this program, this was a collaboration. It was university course, but with elders and tribal members as co-instructors for the course. This was really important to us, that this was a shared responsibility. This was really driven from within the tribe, really. And this was an important piece of how the curriculum worked. We prioritized exploration of identity for students, what does it mean to be a scientist? What does it mean to be an Indigenous person? And what is the relationship between those things? We integrated technology for the purpose of using it as a tool to connect to culturally significant resources and landscapes. So the use of technology wasn't in and of itself a goal necessarily, although it was part of some of the competencies that were identified. But we really think of technology as something that can further the values and the connection to the land, and ideally shouldn't disrupt that connection. We integrated the DACOM skills with this idea of direct workforce development. We were able to align the curriculum to the cultural standards that were developed by the Nez Perce tribe education program through the State Tribal Education Partnership. That's work that Joyce McFarland and Alicia Wheeler significantly led. And we were grateful to have access to those so that we thought about the curriculum as aligning to these ways of learning that have been present since time immemorial. These cultural standards are meant to help teachers understand like how learning has traditionally happened, and we did the best that we could to try out those practices within this curriculum. And then it was significantly too is integrated with the formal school resources, so teachers curriculum that existed within school, and then the Upward Bound program, which is a program of the University of Idaho, but that works within Lapwai High School, Kamiah High School. So our summer course structure, and this is where I invite anybody to weigh in and share stories, but we started with exploration of identity and personal stories. For example, the young men did ledger art style drawings that sort of significant aspects of their identity. The young women developed a memory string that had them putting beads on a string for each significant life experience that they'd had, and then sharing those stories as a way to really set the stage that the whole person was welcomed and necessary in this educational environment, that we weren't asking anybody to separate their personal and cultural identities from the academic coursework that we were engaging in. And that was a theme that ran throughout the whole camp. Then we did field lessons in remote sensing technologies, use of drones, folks from fisheries, forestry, fire management programs all did field activities that had students engaged in like some of the tasks that they might do if they were working for one of those departments, understanding how remote sensing technology might be useful to answer questions that are of interest to the tribe. And then another really significant piece of the whole project, from my perspective at least, was that we had Angel Sabota and Tutlo, who were present, and then Josiah as well, and then of course our elders, integrating this first language into the curriculum. So when we were studying fish, sharing the names for fish, sharing stories about how language shapes the way that shapes some of the relationship to the land. And this is where maybe Josiah, if you want to weigh in to share an example of that. Can I put you on the spot to do that?
Maybe. Okay, got it. Can you hear me okay? So yeah, one of the important components that we wanted to include was language. And so we're indebted to Angel and Tutlo for participating in that regard, because one of the things that often gets overlooked in projects is the presence and use of our language. And, you know, we've always known that our language comes from our landscape, and it's a product of the intimate details and knowledge and information that we have in exploring that relationship with the land over the course of eons. And so we impress that upon our young people because we want them to know and use their language, because that language represents stability. And you can kind of liken it to a canary in a coal mine in some regards, because you know, they've done studies where they found that once an indigenous language passes away, the biodiversity is not far behind. And so there's a tremendous weight on our young people to know and use their language in whatever their endeavor might be, their life endeavor, because it's not just that this present generation is dependent on that, on the use of that language, it's that future generations are as well, along with everybody else that depends upon, you know, biodiversity. So, you know, the important thing that we wanted to do was make sure that that language was there, available, present, and used as much as possible. So we tried to incorporate that in as many aspects as we could.
Thanks for sharing that. I was also thinking about how the elders contributed stories, their personal stories or traditional stories that helped shape students' understanding of whatever it was that we're studying, whether it was relationship to a particular kind of tree that's used in a particular way, or stories about the start of the fisheries program and the way that Indigenous knowledge was used to shape that. And I wonder if I can put Dr. Whitman on the spot to maybe share something about an example of something that he might have shared with the young people about the fisheries program or whatever.
Thank you, Carla. I like listening to you talk about these things. I'm trying to share as many things as we could, I guess, that were relevant to a specific time in discussion, relevance to content. I think we touched upon that because we had people, Josiah, and I think our grad students really helped out there. I've had time to think of this since that time up through last year, when nothing was going on. And then, of course, now talking about the final approach. Something that sticks out to me is the recognition and acceptance. While we may laud and try to teach through stories or through interpretations, the acceptance from the students, I think, were very good. We were very encouraged. But I guess the thing that Dr. Idle and I talked a little bit about is that the continuation of that effort probably needs to be put in place. The acceptance, I looked at things and I questioned a couple of people that I know from the CNR, College of Natural Resources. We related events, we related stories specific to issues like be they wildlife, be they fisheries, be they the plant resources, trees, etc. We thought that the advisement of putting that into a curriculum, especially where we had people like Josiah leading the way with Angel and others interpreting the language to fit the culture. But is that a one way? listening to Carla talk this thing through, it took me back then. The process lacks initiation. When Mr. Seth and I talked during the course of the past year about some of the things that we discussed, stories we shared, new stories we had, and then we thought, where does that pick up? Where does that end? It needs something that's a continuum. Excuse me. It doesn't appear that the CNR, the people that initiate all these efforts, that put this into actual evaluation for education. Is that going to be serviced only through the efforts like with Moss? When we had a chance to tell stories and relate incidents, be they cultural or be they just funny stories, we thought, where do we put these standards and where does that enter into a learner process? Hence what we have a dividing wall, native/indigenous on one side, and on the other, I have a question mark. U of I, Wazoo, LC, where? Because the extraordinary efforts that Dr. Idle and others that seem to put into this, we don't want to see that just kind of fritter away and disappear in the waters of the Piet Lake. I certainly wouldn't want to see that. I guess I'm a little more engaged with the thought processes because now I have older grandchildren that are going to be going through the process. I have one that wants to be a scientist, but lacks the grades of getting into U of I. So I told her, well, go to a community college, go somewhere to get 2 years, get your GPA up to where you can get into where you want to do in wildlife biology. Or the other one, my other granddaughter wants to get into chemistry. And I relay what we've structured, what we've learned, because we learned also on this. We may offer lessons, life lessons, stories, but we also learn too. And I listened to Ms. Bourgeois go through the things that she knows, and it's the things that she knows and does like a book. We need to accentuate that. Where does that fit within the curriculum of a college? Where does that fit within the acceptance of students that come to this program? If there's no program, then what happens? Those are things that I fear, because then I have my own grandchildren, different age groups are asking me these things, and I'm kind of at loss trying to see this is what I recommend you can do when we don't have something that we can actually put together and say, this is a word accepted. This is what you're going to get out of it. What you put into it, you need to accelerate that. You need to become good students, but also you need to know of your own people, your own history, your own culture, eventually your own language. Tie all that together. Maybe we failed maybe I failed as an elder. I feel a little, that maybe we lost some of the structure of that. There are a lot of things Mr. Seth and I have talked about, different personal stories and things that we probably should have relayed back when, 2 years ago. So where does that go now? Are we 2 years older and smarter? Anyhow, that just, Dr. Idle, Carla, that's some of my reflections in my mind now as I listen to you, and you're making me think again, which is good. Hello.
Well, as always. Your words are very appreciated. We actually started this morning, Kay meeting our dean, Dennis Becker. And I agree with you. I think that this work needs to not fade away, and really thinking about how do we make this kind of work more present within the college in general. We also have Lee Vierling, who's head of our environmental science program, who was a co-PI on this project, and he's here today. So I'm hoping we can continue those conversations. And this is exactly, one of the reasons that I'm excited that we're gathered here today. So thank you for your reflections. One of the other things that we did within the program, we had students come up with questions and conduct their own research projects. And we said that these projects needed to be rooted in understandings that they were gaining from their elders, from the land, from the presentations. They needed to use some of the technologies that were being presented, but really that we asked them to form their own research questions, but not just something that is a curiosity to them strictly, but that really was grounded in something that elders had identified as being important, something that they had learned from the land, something that was presented to them. And I'm going to share an example of one of those student inquiries in a minute. And I'll just finish this talk about the course structure by saying that the last thing that we had students do was give presentations on those research findings, but we said that these weren't just going to be, standing up there in front of a PowerPoint, ironically. They needed to incorporate the Nez Perce language. They needed to incorporate stories. They needed to introduce themselves in relationship to who they are, who they came from, their families. And so there was the presentations themselves. We asked students to model a lot of the cultural standards that we were using to drive a lot of the curriculum design. So those were wonderful presentations, and you can see a picture of an example of one. This was I'm guessing by the picture that it had to do with fish. Oops, I will not advance there. So I do want to share an example of one of the research projects that students did. So we were out in the field, and Kay actually had observed that in this place where we were, there was this more bear grass than she had seen in other places. Can I ask Kay or Josiah or maybe Lee Bourgeau to explain the significance of bear grass?
I'll take the first crack at it. So the significance of that meadow grass is that it's the only grass that's used in baking qatmis. And many of our young people, they don't know the taste of qatmis very often. And so, qatmis is one of our cultural foods that we go and we dig in these meadows like this. There are many areas that we still use today. And that root was a staple food back in the day. Depending on who you were and where you were at, that could comprise up to half of your diet. And so that's a significant portion of your sustenance and health. And now we've been, because of the whittling of our culture, that plant is now, not just a delicacy, but a rarity. And it takes not just the work to go out and dig the root up, but also, you know, a few days to bake it in the earth, and it's only done by that process. And that grass that's in that meadow there is the only one that's used there. And so we wanted our young people to engage in a lot of these different plants, because we had to build context for them to upon which their inquiries would lie. So that was one of the important things that we wanted to help them understand. And so we were able to explain that to them, what the importance of that grass is, and why it's important to our people, and why it's deserving of scientific inquiry.
Lee, would you like to add anything to that?
Just that I'm a gatherer, and that's one of the most important elements we use when we're preparing the compass. And it's really noticeable when we go out to gather the bear grass that it's getting more and more difficult to find it, and it's not as healthy as it used to be. So I'm really glad that our young people are learning. And so that I'm just thinking of Josiah and Marcy when they noticed that we had foreign plants in our compass fields, and they as scientists could address that. And so I'm really glad that we have young people learning that, you know, the importance of bear grass to our people, because compass is so important to us. And being able to prepare it, I mean, if we don't have bear grass, what are we going to do to prepare our important roots? Hello.
So it was teachings just like that the young people heard from Lee and from Josiah. And so they wanted to know, well, can we use this remote sensing technology? Can we use a drone to help understand in this area? They had also seen that there were sheep that were grazing, and they noticed that the sheep made a pretty big impact. And they said, can we use the drone to actually look at the impact of grazing on this plant? So there's a picture here of one of our grad students flew the drone over that area. And then the high school students were able to look at the drone imagery and to see where there was an area of impact and an area that wasn't impacted. And then they came up with methods to say, okay, let's look for presence or absence of bear grass. And then let's look at the soil health. Let's look at how much moisture is in it, how warm it is. They laid out transects. They did a lot of data collection and measuring. And they integrated all of this into then a presentation that they were able to give to their peers, to their elders, and then also to somebody from the Forest Service who has some ability to influence some of the land management practices in this particular place. And she said, you know, this was really important to have this evidence because we know that we need to be managing for cultural resources, you know, and having young people being able to provide some evidence to say like, hey, there is this impact was, you know, it's a step towards at least understanding and I think for those young people, the power of the voice that they might be able to have. But I think one of the most significant parts was just that this inquiry arose out of the stories from the elders and what the young people had directly observed on the land itself. Dr. Whitman.
Thank you. One of the elements of the maintenance of these plants that are critical to our cultural knowledge and our cultural practices and survival of those. And when Lee was bringing these issues up, instantly that came to my mind that the question on ethnobotany, how we identified bear grass, how we identified different kind of things. And Lee touched on something that probably needs a discussion to somebody that's going to go into those particular fields or encouraging them to do that. And that's how the impact of bear grass, as an example. Is there something happening to them that is disallowing them the ability to provide the cooking and the coverage for the fixing of the chemes? Or if you're roasting any of your like goat or mountain sheep or bear, you have to put that in the ground to cover it and cook it the same way. And bear grass is critical. Something that I think that we probably needed to talk with the Forest Service a little bit more on, and that was the issues of them managing a culture resource or managing a resource for general use. We found 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when my sister brought it to my attention that the bear grass was disappearing in certain specific areas that we use them and access them. As I found out from a friend of mine who is the superintendent of the Nez Perce Forest, he said that they put those out as a plant that had viable use in decorations. And so they would take wholesale clumps, pulling them out of the ground, and they were using them as holiday decorations. Now, when you have a commercial use of a plant that does not have the application that we depend upon for our nutrition and our survival, you look at other issues, be they huckleberries, be they different types of berry crops, to where the Forest Service has gone out and commercially allowed the picking and using of artificial means of propagation, to get at the crops, so to speak. So bear grass has fallen by the wayside. And I think what's happening, as Lee was talking, it kind of tickles my mind that perhaps the regrowth is like when you don't dig enough chemes or chaos, it withers. It does not really get the strength and necessary numbers and so forth and sizes. There are a lot of things in that, I guess, that we have to expand the practices of all the things that survive them for our use and for our teaching to our children and our students, and perhaps furthering their education so that they can come out and protect that and use the resources, like Lee talking about the fact that the impact of bear grass perhaps is something's happening in a regrowth. Don't know. So there are many other facets of plants out in the forest that probably need a fresh look, dedicate ourselves to looking to see how can we use this. I know that when we gather our tobacco, Leroy and I gather our hitoto and our other, it's starting to disappear again. Why? We can't put our finger on it here. Again, 20, 30 years ago, the Forest Service is trying to, and BLM, exterminate those plants. And the University of Idaho plant physiology professor that I had, he said, that's because there's no commercial value. They become nothing more than a weed, fit for extermination. So unless there's a way they can viably make it a commercial plant, do we You know, what do we do? How do we do this? It's kind of a ticklish situation because if we shed too much on it, it's going to fall by the wayside like our U-wood. Our U-wood is not coming back the way it used to be because they ripped out of the ground. Loggers chained them out, but then people went out and started getting it because of the, at that time, a cancer property. So now we're seeing disappearance of some of the things. And so what do? We tell stories about something that used to be, that's not there anymore. That's a worry that I have. And we have all these students, we need to pick their interests. We need to get them into some place that's going to accept them and help them. I have a friend, Dr. Merv Cano, who works for with Dr. Wildcat out of Haskell. They've identified these policies and these resources. He said, but it has to come from the local Indigenous folks to make it work. So anyway, I just, my mutterings in the back of my mind is telling me we always have these things that we need to do. Kay's looking at the clock, so I guess I better shut up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, again, I think conversations we need to keep having, and not just talk, we need to do things. I do want to share that. So there was the summer camp, there was a school year program. Marcy Carter will talk a little bit about that as part of her research. The school year followed some similar structures, integrated. It was part of existing coursework. Devin Boyer was one of our lead teachers who invited us into her class, and we were able to work with students on studying local things in fisheries and forestry. They did a citizen science project looking at butterfly habitat that Marcy's going to talk a little bit about. And then, of course, we had our elders come in, but then also we had staff from the tribe come in and help with that education as well, along with grad students who are participating in the MOS program. And so one of the questions that we were asking, just in terms of like outcomes from the project, is, and there was a lot of different things that we were looking at, but this one particular thing was, in what ways do students connect their cultural identity with what it means to do science? So going back to this idea of broadening the conception of science. And I'll have to say, importantly, throughout the course of this project, it shifted from, wanting students to identify with science to really, and this was, I think, through teachings that Josiah in particular gave to me and to our team, was the idea that rather than identifying as scientists, to think of how, as an Indigenous person, as an first person, for the young people to think, how can science be a tool that can be used to perpetuate the values of my community, the health of the land, right? So that it was, the identifying with science wasn't the primary goal. And this was, so I'm grateful to Josiah for helping kind of shift that and shape that part of the curriculum, as well as to the elders who also, through their teachings and conversations, really helped to reframe that. So we talked with students. We did a lot of visiting with students, just trying to understand their experience, and had some talk circles where we got the students together and had them sharing with each other and on certain topics. We also had students doing presentations, reflections, using their field journals, and through these sources of evidence, we were able to kind of understand some of the ways that the young people are making meaning of this experience. And we're still working on writing some of that up, and have had follow-up meetings with students and presented back some of the findings, and then have been talking amongst the team about some of the meetings and sharing those with students. And so it's an ongoing process, but a few things just to point out. So students really, I think the elders were one of the most significant pieces of the curriculum, sorry, I don't mean to say a piece of the curriculum, instruments, people, influencers in the curriculum. The young people talked about, when elders talk about the land, how you protect it, restore it, nurture it, and how that plays a big part of our culture. The young people saw this building a bridge between science and culture. They really came to see, they would hear Lee Bourgeois talk about her work as a gatherer, and they would see the science in her understanding of knowing when to go, what to look for. The stories that she shared with them, they really connected. They saw the science in this kind of understanding that their elders had. They were thinking about like seeing science and culture connecting when thinking about using a particular technology to point it towards things that are culturally significant, or thinking about something that resonates maybe with the values of the tribe. So thinking about when we were learning about the land and how they're using drones to look at the vegetation and streams, how it like helps save trees, help streams, clear water quality, because this is part of our culture, the land, right? So thinking about science and culture connecting when the young people had the opportunity to use science to study things that were culturally significant, or to use technology to perpetuate things that have cultural significance. I talked about this a little bit already, but the young people were really seeing, like, going back to Josiah's vision, for them to recognize the science that has been there for all this time. The young people were, seeing that this knowledge, it's been passed down generation to generation. Like, we pick roots, we know which one is healthy, what to eat. And then also bringing into this that the ability to observe and monitor change over time. And so really seeing that traditional knowledge holds significant scientific observation about the land. And of course, that this is also then, it's not this abstract knowledge, that it's actually connected back to what's valuable and important. And finally, this was the one of the things that one of the quotes that resonates most deeply with me in terms of how young people thought about their experience and the importance of what they were doing from an educational standpoint, is that that we need young people and natural resources or cultural resources to protect our sacred foods or places. If these things are not protected or taken care of, then not only would they be gone, next generations would not be able to learn. So this is why we have camps like this. This young person says that they've known that they've had this responsibility, and that it's on them to continue this and to perpetuate all of these things that they're talking about. So I think just this idea for me that the young person recognizing that the importance of protecting this so that future generations would also be able to learn. And to me, I'm reading that they're being able to learn from the land and also from their elders and from their community. I guess we should keep moving. I do want to invite elders to reflect on those student reflections. I think I'm going to ask Marcy to go ahead and talk. Okay,
can everybody hear me? Good morning. My name is Marcy Carter, and I am an employee here at the Nez Perce Tribe. I am the Deputy Director in the Watershed Division. I'm an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe. I have two children, one who is going to be graduating from Lewiston High School on Saturday, and then a 13-year-old daughter. who will be entering high school next year. I have a bachelor's degree from Lewis Clark State in environmental biology and an MS from the U of I in water and wildlife resources. And I'm currently a PhD candidate in natural resources at the University of Idaho. Do I move the slides? Okay. So, this presentation is kind of basically the outline of what my dissertation is going to be and the things that I've been, I guess, putting together within this program that we are learning about, that we're talking about today. You know, a big part of what the students as well as the staff, you know, have incorporated is, of course, Indigenous knowledge. You know, and basically our people have had our own way of looking at and relating to the environment, which is known as, you know, Indigenous knowledge. This way of life is and has been a learned system through process constructed through the observation and adapting for survival. It is an interrelationship between species and environment, and these perspectives promote more of a unified understanding of the ecosystems, especially with the interacting relationships among water, plants, and animals. Remote sensing is basically defined as the science of obtaining information about objects or areas from a distance, which is typically gathered from an aircraft or satellite, and in this case, we use drones. It is a non-contact recording of information. This data gathering occurs at a distance from the object, so you don't have to actually go out into the field. It is inobtrusive if the sensor is just passing over and the energy and recording the energy which is reflected or emitted from the object. And you know, we gain knowledge from this. So part of what I'm trying to do is to bring Indigenous knowledge and remote sensing together. And in doing this, you know, the practice of documenting and obtaining knowledge has been done by our people, our Indigenous people across the globe for millennia, forever. Our people have collected data or observed data through observations, and then they've made decisions based on what they see. You know, our ancestors lived closely with the sign of nature. They watched for the usual things to happen or the unusual things that happened, what the animals were doing, and then also with observed changes to the moon or the sunset, and then they made decisions based on what was happening in the environment. Go ahead, Carla. So I've outlined my chapters, and this is just a general outline. These titles aren't necessarily what they're going to be, or maybe they will be, I don't really know. I have started to write. So my first chapter will basically be a self-perspective of myself. So I'll be, you know, looking at my own science identity and how that drives me in my duties as a person, as a tribal member, and as an employee within the tribe here. And then also incorporating my Nez Perce identity and how that also drives me in my duties here as an employee of the tribe. And then I plan on reflecting on this as a scientist, and looking at how those things conflict, because I am a trained Western scientist, and it's been hard for me to kind of make that transition, I guess. We were talking about bear grass earlier, and my Western science background tells me that bear grass is a grass that I wish I had a picture, but it's not the bear grass that our people call bear grass in the meadows that's used for baking hummus. Which, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's wrong, but that's just something that I've had to try to wrap my brain around. They're different. So you can go on, next slide. My second chapter is a literature review, and I'm looking at the relationship between traditional knowledge and then the use of UAVs in natural resources. Excuse me. And that's just in general, how is it used? How are UAVs used in natural resources? And how that relates to traditional knowledge. And I will provide a summary of the relevant recent articles. Go ahead, Kay, or Carla, sorry. So my third chapter is the chapter that was involved with the students at Lapwai High School. I was asked, actually, when this was kind of being discussed, to come up with a project that the students could actually just walk out their doors and go and do science. And so there's not very many places that the students could actually go out the door to do. So I came up with this project, this butterfly project, that the students could go out and actually, do Western science, but also use their traditional knowledge on, the existence of butterflies here in this valley. So what we did was we had the students come out. They laid out the transects, and they did the surveys for butterflies, but any kind of butterfly evidence, eggs, if they saw anything flying. And then we did use a UAV to fly the area. And this was, again, early on in the project, so we didn't have any students that were flight certified. So we had a couple employees from fisheries come and actually do the flight for us. Next slide. So, because this valley is known and has been known for butterflies, we asked the students to go home and interview or inquire of their family and friends, any type of information that they might have from memories of butterflies and what kind of butterflies. I also did some research on, what butterflies were here, or what butterflies were best known for. And actually, there's one story that Angel Sabota forwarded to me about the white butterflies, and how there was a I can't remember it right now. Josiah, do you know it? It was up in the north end of the valley, and yeah. Anyway, There's a couple of them.
I'll be honest.
Anyway, I won't be writing about that one. Okay, next slide. So anyway, this is basically the study area. This, for those of you that aren't familiar, the white building just to the north and what is that, east? That's our health clinic. And then right behind it or right north of it is the high school. So the kids were able to come out, walk up Beaver Grade and get to their little study area. And the study area, you know, I know what butterflies require, or at least in general. And this wasn't necessarily the best butterfly habitat, but there were some native plants up there that we laid our transects across so that they could at least have an idea of how to search these plants, looking for evidence of eggs or caterpillars, and then also just to see if they could see any flying. So next slide. Just a few pictures of the students laying out their transects. Me, of course, giving order, it looks like. And then this bottom slide is our 2 fisheries employees flying the area for us. So this is just, I haven't done the actual analysis of the imagery yet, but this is what it looks like from up above, I guess. The area has been, there is some native plants, of course, but there is lots of noxious weeds that have encroached. Next slide. I don't know if so yeah, we're just looking at health here, vegetation health. Go ahead. So I guess just to kind of close that chapter or that information out, I guess the point of doing this was, you know, so that the students could actually experience, you know, doing science and then using their traditional knowledge, but also to kind of, you know, I've always had an interest in this because this was, you know, a place of butterflies and now it is not. And, you know, I'd hope that we could have, you know, came up with, you know, some recommendations on, you know, what we as a community could do to, you know, maybe restore some habitat for butterflies, change the way we manage our uplands and others. So, I mean, that's a whole different monster, I think, because that's something we'll have to deal with the tribe. But anyway, that was kind of my vision when we came up with this project. And I hope the students actually got something out of it. My last chapter is about, we're going to be looking at using remote sensing and UAVs and traditional knowledge in concert with managing a culturally significant place. And this place is Musselshell Meadow. It's one of our last meadows that our people can go to gather chutmas. It's an important place. You know, it's been used for forever, for millennia. And so the plan is that we're going to be looking at the current condition of the meadow, doing the veg surveys, and then actually coming up with conclusions and recommendations for how we're going to manage this meadow into the future. Currently, it is fenced off. Fisheries fenced it off probably 20 years ago, and we maintain that fence every year. We're currently replacing some of that fence just to keep cows out. The Alati has, we fight with the forest every year about cows up there because they get into the meadow and it's hard to get them out. The Alati takes, forever to come up and get them out. But anyway, you can go to the next slide. That's what it looks like. And it's probably looking like this right now. If you want to get up there and view it, it's beautiful. So it is a place, that we have been using since time immemorial. These two pictures on the left are of my grandmother's grandmother. And then the bottom one is of my grandma Essie. She's got some youth out there showing them how to dig. And then the other photo is my two kiddos. I have them working on cleaning the tetanus. So we still go out there. Gatherers like Lee, we're out there using the meadow. And so currently it is, there is some noxious weeds. We've actually had to go in there and spray herbicide on our traditional food just to keep the weeds from taking over. We found several patches of reed canary, which is a rhizomatous plant, which means it grows like a mat underneath the soil. And so it just takes over. Those areas that we did have to spray, a couple of them were right in the center. It's been about 6 years and we've marked them so people don't go there and dig, but the chemist amazingly has actually started to come back in those areas. The other issues that are affecting that meadow are, and this might get to what Sai was talking about earlier, it's not wet anymore or like it used to be. So, you can see in the background of that picture with my grandma, you can see the road back there. So that road transects all of the hydrology that's coming off that hillside. So that water isn't getting to the meadow. And so the meadow isn't staying as wet as it should for as long as it should. It's drying out earlier. On this other side, there's also a road that our people use to actually access the meadow, but that road also basically redirects water or the water stands on the road. So right now, actually, we have some work in process. We're going to be redoing that road that goes into the meadow and putting in some culverts so water can get through it. But there's also areas that used to have springs that came through that don't anymore. And you can tell the change in that vegetation because the chemist isn't as widespread. It is shrinking, although that vegetation is native, it probably isn't supposed to be there. There's also conifers encroaching on all sides. So we really need to, and that's part of what I'm going to be doing is looking at this meadow and looking at the vegetation and coming up with some sort of recommendations on how we can keep it into the future. Next. So this is just another photo from high above that we stitched together. Next. You can see this was taken probably in June. So there's still water, but you can see, just historical past uses of that meadow. Apparently before we fenced it, people used to just drive out there and do whatever. And at one time people had tried to till it and farm it. So we're fortunate that what we have is what we have based on historical past use of it. Oh, this is just another photo. You can see, you know, these conifers, and they're dying, you know, probably weren't here historically. You know, I was out with Alan Pinkham and a few years ago, and he told me that, you know, our people used to, the last person that left the meadow used to light it on fire, which would, you know, take care of those conifers that were encroaching. You can see they're encroaching in. So anyway, that's kind of, we're looking at those kind of activities through this chapter. So just overall general conclusions, you know, that I can make. The Indigenous knowledge and remote sensing techniques, such as use of multi or hypospectral imagery has been limited, actually. So there isn't very many studies out there that have put these two together. You know, and we can provide a more holistic, detailed understanding of the change that's happening, and allows us to transcend common spatial and temporal barriers. Traditional and Indigenous perspectives help not only set management goals, but also place moral perspectives that go beyond the colonial perspective of resource management, which I think is so important. And yeah, I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Marcy. Yeah, so we can hear there's a lot of work, there's a lot of thought, and just appreciate all of that that's gone into your project and the way that you were willing to work with the young people. So we do have a student film. I think I'm going to save that so that we can, we have a few more minutes of our Facebook Live stream. And I want to have Kay and Josiah have a little bit of time to just sort of bring it home, just put this back now into the broader context of work that's going to continue. And then Kay talking about next steps for what she would like to see happen.
Thank you, Carla. I think I want to describe a little bit about our way of life, and then I want to go into why this project is so amazing and beautiful. The place I would start is that for eons, since time immemorial, longer than tribal memory can recall, Nez Perce people have been working on a very complex value hierarchy. And from time to time, those values have to shift, but there are core values that sustain the population, and individuals become more and more aware of those values and how they need to shift in order to accommodate change as they get older. And so that's why we value our elders so much, is because they've had the time and experience to contemplate what things are important and what things need to survive. And right now, because of changes that have taken place, our culture is heavily fragmented. Pockets of information and knowledge are carried by distinct individuals and families. And so there is a rebirth from those fragments that's occurring right now because of our people being involved in things like this. And so one of the things that really touches me about this project in particular is the elements that it combines. And on one hand, we've got young people that are outside doing things like, conducting experiments and, engaging in scientific inquiry, but also we're taking them out of the classroom, because this project couldn't have been done in a classroom. Not only did it take kids back into their first classroom, you might say, but it engaged a couple of other elements that I think are invaluable to the survival of Nez Perce people on this land. It involved elders, and we're indebted to Leroy Seth, and Silas for being there to essentially just talk with these young people. And they got stories every day about what was important in terms of the perspective of those three individuals in particular. And I'm thankful that we were able to balance that and have their involvement on a daily basis, because it really lit those young people up. And the other element that we included was just that of, language, as I was describing earlier. And, having young people speak and use their language is, invaluable. And I won't cover that again, but having all of that come together is reassuring for our elders too, because, the other reason why it's so important to have elders involved in this is because as an individual gets older and they discover the values of that culture, they want to entrust the management of those values to young people. They have to, because we've all been told, I'm not going to be here forever. I've heard that from my grandparents, aunts and uncles, older siblings, and they're gone now. And so the reason why another reason why this project is so impressive is that it gives that reassurance to our old people that young, inquisitive, intelligent, fiery young minds are going to be entering into this work. And they're going to be conducting, real, not only elaborate, but culturally relevant scientific inquiries along the lines of what Marcy described. That's not just science, but that's relevant science that's going to help our people to survive. But it's only because she had elders surrounding her to coach her in what was important that this project was born out of. Countless hours of just, you saw the pictures. She was there with her grandparents. And now she has her children involved in that work. And that's the beauty of survival, is that it's a balance of the living population, taking the values that were worked on by the Anaconma, or all those people that came before you, including the animals, and expressing a life for future generations, what Silas calls the halakapu, the ones that will come. And so I think what this project did for me was it helped me to identify different components that make for a profound impact on the survival of our people. And so now what it does for me is it helps me to, when a project comes across my desk, two of the things that I'll ask about are, where are the old people? And where are the young people? Then after that, what are they doing? And how does that, contribute to the survival of our people? Because that's what we're trying to do here. The Nez Perce people are trying to perpetuate a sensitive relationship I'm not sure if there's an opportunity for questions, but if there is, maybe I'll hold off and elaborate a little bit more at that point.
Let's let Kay say a few words, and then I think, I don't know if we'll stay in this format or if we'll just then stop and talk as a group. Kay.
All right, so yes, our time is running short for this presentation that is somewhat overdue. So yes, our presentation is running a little behind schedule, and we're on a schedule to end. But before we close the presentation of this beautiful work that began actually in 2012, is a result of partnerships, making connections and establishing relationships with resources that we have in the state of Idaho. Back in 2012, the Idaho Rural Partnership conducted a community review in Lapwai. It was a review in partnership between the Nez Perce tribe and the city of Lapwai. And both entities felt that education was important to our community and to, more importantly, its children. And in that review process is when I met Dr. Melinda Davis, who then was in the private sector with the Idaho National Laboratory, a woman very involved in statewide activity. Got a call from her in 2015, and she was now then with the University of Idaho and working as the director of STEM education. She says, Kay, we're working on this grant application to the National Science Foundation. What do you think? So I worked with Carla and Melinda on the work of the application that went in, was eventually funded in 2016. And it's a project that ended in 2019. But the beauty of this whole project is its education and impact on children and students and teachers. And what's next after this project is the conversation is not going to end here, Dr. Silas Whitman. In the last year, I've been watching the state of Idaho for a long time, but in this last year in particular, with 2 new state initiatives with the Idaho STEM Ecosystem Network that's been underway for over a year now with the Idaho STEM Action Center, and also with the Idaho Development Workforce Council with an initiative called the Idaho Talent Pipeline Management System. Through these 2 mechanisms and resources, we have an opportunity to continue the good work that we're doing with additional support. And so I want to thank the Dean of the College of Natural Resources, Dennis Becker, who's with us here today. He is ready to share some exciting news with the tribe and other tribes and the Idaho at large for the work that they've been doing in curriculum development to address the variety of choices that Idaho's children have as they look to pursue opportunity in Idaho. You know, I think the thing that I constantly hear at the tables this last year is that there's a growing concern that the institutions are concentrating on that students should go into college and pursue bachelor degree programs and masters and PhD programs when a large part of the students don't even get to completion of a bachelor's degree and go back into the community and work. We have a large workforce here of great professional men and women who do the work of natural resources, and it would be great to provide them with tribal industry certifications that they earn through a variety of ways, through career technical education, through apprenticeship. The Idaho Career Technical Education has an awesome page called Skill Stacking, and it's when our conversation working with Carla and Melinda when I began talking about skill stacking. So I see good things happening from this point forward, and that our community has a wonderful team of natural resource professionals who are ready to work with our children and our community for the sustainability of our Indigenous knowledge. And there's a bunch of people that come to mind that I know that are already here, planted and doing good work. And so Carla with the University of Idaho, thank you for bringing this project to the Nez Perce tribe and allowing so many people to have this experience together to mark the beginning of many good years coming ahead of us. So, so Carla, did you want to say the closing words, or how about the Dean of the College of Natural Resources?
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to have the final word, but I do appreciate the invitation to say a few words. You know, our relationship with the Nez Perce tribe is really important to all the tribes in the region, really important. And our responsibility is to train, to teach, to conduct research across a broad scale. And that's more than just providing, as you say, bachelor degrees or PhD degrees. And so I'm committed, I'm very committed to working with you to identify associate degrees, micro-credentials, other ways of providing education in many places, not just in Moscow, hopefully, but in many ways, in many locations, so that we can accommodate the training and the education of all of our brothers and sisters. So I just very much appreciate the opportunity to partner with you on that.
Thank you to everybody. Just one more time. I do want to acknowledge our elders again. They were the most significant piece of the program in many, many ways, and especially for the students to be able to sit and visit and to learn from them. So, and it was no small time commitment. So I want to acknowledge them one more time. I want to acknowledge the staff work, Kay and Josiah, the support of the college. I want to acknowledge Marcy's work and our graduate students that worked on this project, the students that were part of it, the teachers, the co-collaborators at the university, Lee Bierling and Teresa Cohen and Jan Idle. And I think I want to just one more time acknowledge that this work is part of a legacy of millennia of years of knowledge building and learning how to live in this place. And I am grateful for the opportunity to learn from those who've had that knowledge passed to them. Want to recognize again my sense of responsibility, and I think our sense of responsibility to perpetuate in whatever way we can that knowledge and that culture, and just look forward to future generations, and grateful for all of you. I think we'll continue this conversation offline. Thanks, Jan, for hanging on, and Shani, thanks for hanging in there. Maybe we can call you if you want to have questions, and I think the rest of us are in this room, so thank you. Katsiaya.
Thanks all.